sure that we ended today on a positive note. And so a couple of observations. Isn't it fantastic? It's one of my life's ambitions to actually queue for the toilets. And, you know, there's a massive queue for the ladies' toilets, and it's fantastic. I'm usually in there on my own. So I'm Jo Hannaford. I am head of technology at Goldman Sachs. I do introduce myself as a computer programmer. I think that's what I'm most proud of. I've been a computer programmer for literally 30 years, and it feels like a much shorter time. I've had a wonderful career as a programmer, and often when I hear some of the difficulties that young women face as they go into being a programmer, I wonder why that is, and I'm going to touch on that a bit in my presentation. I think that, let me just talk about Goldman Sachs briefly. Goldman Sachs is 40,000 people globally. It's an investment bank. 11,000 of our staff are computer programmers. And when people talk about firms that are technology companies, I mean, I really think that every company now is a technology company. It's a company that's been around for 150 years. We're celebrating 150 years today and this year. And if you think about what's happened in the last 150 years, we have a track record of being able to adapt to technologies. Even in my lifetime at Goldman Sachs, I've been there 21 years. I remember when I joined, there were hundreds of traders on NASDAQ, the exchange in New York. Now there's 4. And so the constant evolution of technology, I mean, 150 years ago, the telegram was just being introduced. Can you imagine if you were in the middle of America and suddenly the telegram was introduced? And so our ability to use technology, that's really not new for us. So I think the reason I've stayed so long at Goldman Sachs is because the values of that company really match my own values. It's very collaborative, it's very creative, it's quite authentic. And so I haven't found it particularly difficult to join as a junior programmer. I was, 10 years as a vice president, I was 8 years as a managing director, and now I'm 4 years as a partner. And really, I've enjoyed every moment of it. I mean, there are difficulties about sustaining a career, especially balancing your personal life. I get all that. But my decision, when I went into computing 30 years ago, it was considered to be a really great job for a woman. So all of the problems that are faced in the last 15 years around why it's difficult for women to, can women program, they didn't even exist when I was thinking about it. When I went to high school, I went to a normal high school, my maths teacher was encouraging us to become programmers, and it was considered to be a great job. And the secrets, I suppose, of why I'm successful, I don't think are that uncommon. I work hard. I mean, I don't work long hours necessarily, but I work hard. I'm very optimistic. So I'm someone that thinks to myself, well, why not? Why can't I have a go at doing that? I'm not somebody that thinks to myself, can I? I think, well, they can. I don't think they're any brighter than me. I'll have a go at that. And also, I suppose, I love technology. I mean, remember, the technologies that I started my career in are now in museums. I mean, the technology that I use today is very different. And this constant evolution, I think it's really exciting. I mean, 5 years ago, we didn't really discuss cloud. Now I know a lot about cloud computing. Now I'm implementing cloud computing at Goldman Sachs. I want to touch on this. A lot of what I've heard today is around the suitability of computing for women. And I really want to tackle this. The history of computing is created by women. And for some reason, we seem to have lost that history. Now, think about some of the early programmers. Much of the early programmers were really office workers that began to automate the office. There's a woman who I'm good friends with, Shirley. She started a company in 1962 of freelance assistants who basically she trained as programmers. She sold her company a few years ago for hundreds of millions of pounds. She only employed female programmers. If you think about some of those histories of the early data operators, if you were a data operator in the 50s and 60s, you were programming, low-level programming mainframes. that's the history of computing. The history of computing is very much grounded upon women. Somehow, in my lifetime, we've allowed that history to be edited. Think about some of the early programming languages that I learnt on my degree and my doctorate. Adele Goldberg created Smalltalk. We debate at work whether really we should just teach Smalltalk as a way of learning object orientation in terms of the most purest form of programming. And when I think about, the programming languages that I learnt in, and some of the kind of higher level programming languages that I use now, I question, and this is a little bit contentious, but it's just my theory, I want to bring the subject of vocabulary. And I was thinking about it because if you think about the recent history of Netflix, and how one executive used one word, a word that we would never really use in society, a word that alienates a whole population of people. That same day, when I was reading that story, I went to work, and some of the vocabulary that's been introduced in my lifetime as a programmer, I wonder whether it's really appropriate, and if you're a young woman, what it really means to you. There's two words in particular. That day, every day in my job, I talk about penetration testing. I mean, no woman in their right mind, when did any woman in this audience ever use the word penetration? And I think to myself, what message are we sending? We could have named that anything. And then the second word I was thinking about, when I was a junior programmer, when we wanted to stop a program, we would either abandon it, or we would stop, or we would exit. Well, guess what we do now? We abort a program. And I think to myself, I don't think in common language, the word abort can only mean one thing to a woman. I don't think you would ever say to your, friends, if you're out shopping with them, I'm going to abort a shopping trip. Or I'm going to abort this flight. Or I really don't like this date, I'm going to abort this date. You would never say that, would you? And yet, we've allowed ourselves to type every day in the way to finish a program, not abandon or stop. But I think to myself, well, what impact does that have on young women who are learning to program? Doesn't it send you a message of alienation? Doesn't it send you a message that we really don't want you in computing? So I do intend to do something about that. I'm in a situation of influence. I'm going to try and address that. Then we talk about what we should do. There's three things I really want to talk about in terms of my message. Educate, engage, and elevate. Let's just talk about educate. I was recently at an event where I was talking to the 10,000 Small Business Program. It's one of the most prestigious entrepreneurship program that Goldman Sachs has. And I often get asked technology questions by these entrepreneurs. And after this event, a very well-known plastic surgeon, a female plastic surgeon, approached me. And she's a plastic surgeon that does restorative surgery, so burn victims. Incredibly complicated. And she has been building a platform to help doctors communicate more effectively. And do you know the question she asked me? This is a very, very senior doctor. She said to me, "Jo, do you really think I could program?" I said to her, "This is ridiculous. I can't even believe you're asking me this question." I said, "Can you program in Python?" I said, "Python's like speaking French." "Of course you can." I said to her, "No one would ever consider me capable of being a restorative plastic surgeon, but I can program in Python," I said to her. And but the fact that she even asked me, something has gone wrong. So think about my own career. Recently, I was asked to launch a new business for Goldman Sachs, Marcus. Marcus UK is a consumer business. So basically, we're an investment bank, and we've suddenly launched a retail consumer presence in an online deposit taking. And it's quite a difficult thing to do, to pivot a company and leverage your engineering in a way that's completely new. No one asked me whether they thought I was capable. No one said to me at work, do you think you're the right person? They just said to me, Jo, this is what we would like to do. And I began to problem solve that problem. We launched it very successfully in August. We have doubled our expectations on the number of people in the UK that have signed up for those deposits. And so this idea that you're constantly learning and constantly being educated, the other question I get is how do I actually stay current in my technical skills? As I've got older, I can't read books, technical books. I just, I actually feel as if my brain is running out of capacity. I used to, go on holiday with my friends and they'd be reading, Julie Cooper, and I'd be reading Java for Dummies. I can't do that anymore. But me, what I do instead is, 2 or 3 times a year, I go to night school and I do programming courses. And typically, programming courses I've never done before. And education and staying current is something that I prioritize. I like the kind of structured learning. I know there's a trend to move away from classroom-style learning. I actually really enjoy classroom-style learning. I like the dynamic and the collaborative nature. And so I basically, make sure that I prioritize that time. Let's talk about engagement. I think I'm at the stage of my career now where I'm thinking about my legacy. And for me, how do I encourage, is one of the reasons why I'm here, how do I encourage women to really have the same type of career that I've had in computing? And so I actively get involved in schemes, some schemes I create. I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Enigma machines. I know that many Polish mathematicians were working at Bletchley Park during the war. I actually pay for a teacher to take Enigma machines, an actual Enigma machine, into schools in underprivileged areas and teach those children how to decode on an actual Enigma machine. We've reached 1,300 schools. We've reached thousands of children. Their response, almost you have to shock people to think, you can actually do this, you can actually do that level of decoding. We've been instrumental in IT for She here in Poland. We have a presence in Poland. I absolutely am completely supportive of the idea that we can actually do that. And then finally, let me kind of talk about encouragement. I was the first senior woman at Goldman Sachs to go to our office in Bangalore in India. It's about 15 years ago, and I met a group of women. And I love this story. And they asked me the following questions. They said to me, well, what does your family think about you working full time? Like, how do you actually do your housework? I said to them, I haven't given I have a cleaner. I've had a cleaner since the age of 21. I mean, I would rather not go for dinner or go without food than have to clean my own house. And I said, but I have a cleaner. And recently I went back to India, and many of those women are now managing directors. And I say to them, you're not asking me about my cleaner now, are you? You're asking me about how you get to partner and whether you can manage bigger teams, and you're all financially independent. And the idea that you can, live your life, intermingling your work and personal life is just incredible. And I think there's a certain example of just staying the course. I mean, when I think about one of the most difficult things I think about my career is getting up every day and coming to work for 8 hours, at least 8 hours every day. Sometimes my mother's sick, sometimes I have problems at home, but just staying the course. And of course, I'm lucky to work for a firm that's highly flexible, but just staying the course and having the confidence to stay the course. And so I want to finish on kind of elevate or encourage. And, Poland scored second place in 2017 in the Eurostat research on the number of female leaders in the EU. We've got 44% female leaders here versus the average of 35%. The talent in Poland is amazing. Every time I come here, I am amazed by the people that I meet. And just the education, the technical skills. I mean, we have a growing division here of programmers. I'm very careful about the work that we give. I don't want tasks, I want problems to be solved. And the response I have is amazing. It is incredibly impressive. And then I want to finish on this. So my one piece of advice to you is to believe in yourself. One of the biggest thing that I do for women at work is that at all levels, it's like a doctor's surgery in my office. They'll come in and they'll say to me, "Jo, do you think that I can do?" And half the time I don't even know what they're talking about. And I say, "Of course you can." And off they go and they do it. And something happens to women when they're teenagers in high school. Something happens to us that takes away our confidence. And it's not just in Poland. I travel the world. It's like an epidemic. And I think the thing that I've done that has made me very successful is the fact that I wouldn't say that I necessarily believe in myself, but I just think to myself, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, why not? You know, and the more successful I am, the more sustaining it is. But put yourself forward for the job that you think maybe you could do it. Don't eliminate yourself from roles. One of the biggest issues that we have is that women do not apply. So one of the statistics that I use at work is this. It takes us 5 phone calls to encourage a woman to apply to a job versus 2 phone calls for a man. And so the problem with that is that if you've got a role to fill and you're starting a project and you need to really get that project started and there's an available man there and it's 2 phone calls, what do you do? So when someone rings you next time, just say yes the first time and try. What's the worst that's going to happen? Thanks very much.